Hello, and welcome to a quick controller briefing regarding the implementation of the Special Altitude Assignment Area. The Special Altitude Assignment Area is an area within some of our center sectors where altitude for direction of flight rules are being amended to follow some real-world conventions which are unique to southern Florida and require significant changes to our current standard operating procedures. Implementation of the Special Altitude Assignment Area rules will affect clearance delivery positions at Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, and their satellite fields, as well as large-scale changes to Miami Center positions. All the changes discussed in these briefings are based on SOPs which will take effect simultaneously at the start of the new year, January 1st, 2021. Until then, please continue using normal procedures. This is the CPC version of the Special Altitude Assignment Area Controller Briefing for controllers who are fully certified through Miami Center. This version of the briefing covers all clearance delivery changes and changes to Miami Center. Note that all ground through approach positions remain unchanged, as does the ocean area. Only clearance delivery and Miami Center domestic are affected. Additional changes to the Palm Beach operation are forthcoming as well, and will be identical in concept to the changes presented within this briefing for Fort Lauderdale and Miami, and we'll share those changes with you upon the eventual completion and release of a new Palm Beach SOP. Starting with Fort Lauderdale delivery and Miami delivery, here are the changes you'll need to get familiar with. A reformatted standalone SOP has been created for Fort Lauderdale, just like the SOP we have for Tampa. New PDAR routing has been added for departures to Jacksonville and Atlanta. You will see them in the Fort Lauderdale and Miami SOPs when they are finalized and released. If aircraft file anything other than those exact routes, you will have to issue an amended route clearance to match, or coordinate with the controllers affected by the non-standard routing. The top altitude to the Orlando and Daytona TRACONs is being changed from at or below flight level 240 to at or below flight level 230. The reasoning will become clear in the next few slides. Historically, we ask our controllers to determine appropriate altitudes for direction of flight based on the magnetic heading from origin to destination, ignoring any routing, usually done via SkyVector for unfamiliar destinations. For example, Fort Lauderdale to Detroit is a 358 heading, meaning we would want them assigned even altitudes. From many airports within the Miami and Palm Beach approach controls, departures northbound over land will be assigned cruise altitudes based not on the magnetic heading to their destination, but based on their SID, or valid departure fix. Winco and Thunder should always be an even cruise altitude, where Headley and Arcs should always be an odd cruise altitude. So a Fort Lauderdale departure to Detroit Metro who filed routing via ARCS would be assigned an odd altitude, but another Fort Lauderdale departure also going to Detroit with routing via Thunder would be assigned an even altitude. The same for Miami. They filed to Detroit via Winco, assign an even altitude, or for Headley, assign an odd altitude. So only with north fixes, Winco, Thunder, Headley, or ARCS, the cruise altitude is based on which fix they file over, and not the heading to their destination. Now, there is one exception to the Winco, Thunder, Headley, ARCS altitude assignments, and that is for Atlanta's. This will be included in the PDAR route and altitude table in the Fort Lauderdale and Miami SOPs, but all departures to Atlanta will be required to follow a specific route that uses ARCS out of Fort Lauderdale or Headley out of Miami. And usually, Headley and ARCS should be given an odd altitude, but for Atlanta, we need to assign an even altitude. Atlanta is the only exception to the rule. Previously, all that was required when validating a given route was to ensure the route went out on a valid SID or via a valid departure fix. Now, for aircraft leaving Miami Center via Winco, Thunder, Headley, or ARCS, there are additional routing requirements. Not only will aircraft need to use an appropriate departure fix, but a short route string will also be required based on which airway the aircraft exits Miami Center airspace. This can be easily retrieved from a table in each of the SOPs. This diagram shows the paths of the required routings for Miami departures in orange and Fort Lauderdale departures in blue. So if a Fort Lauderdale departure has filed to join Q87, we are required to route them via ARCS, CZ, ONUI, Q87. For Y280, we'd assign Thunder, JMAC, Y280. For a Miami to Q77, we'd assign Headley, Stymie, Q77, etc. Aircraft will usually file these routes on their own, but if they do not, clearance delivery is required to issue an amended route clearance to match the partial routes shown in the SOP, unless otherwise coordinated. And again, this only applies to north fixes, Winco, Thunder, Headley, or ARCS. Other departure fixes are handled in the normal way. Moving on to the en route perspective, here are the changes concerning center positions at ZMA. There are no changes to oceanic or interactions with Nassau Center. All changes are handled internally by domestic ZMA sectors. The Orlando shelf is being replaced by the smaller in-pin shelf. Here you can see the original Orlando shelf. ZMA is losing the eastern portion of this area and retaining the western portion, which we're now calling the in-pin shelf. With this shelf gone, aircraft on the Cuban or Pogey arrivals to the Jacksonville TRACON are also changing. JAX is no longer requesting Miami to issue the descend via clearance, so now they will simply be delivered to Jacksonville at or below flight level 310 by the boundary. Now to the meat of the changes, the Florida centerline and the special altitude assignment area. In this diagram, you'll see what we're calling the Florida centerline, depicted in orange, and the special altitude assignment area, depicted in yellow. The Florida centerline is depicted in the new center video map due to shelving with Hobie, and helps clearly delineate the east-west line at which to begin applying the special altitude assignment rules. Looking closer within this area, we can see the basic concept is simple. Northbound aircraft are assigned odd altitudes, and southbound aircraft are assigned even altitudes. It only seems unnatural when you consider routes like this southeasterly one, which look like they'd clearly be odd, but will be even, or the opposite with routes like this northwesterly one, which would, on the same course, be moved from an even altitude he was flying in the ocean area to an odd altitude. A big part of the reasoning behind this system has to do with the airway structure. In short, northbound airways east of the Florida centerline, like Q77 and Q87, are northwesterly in our airspace, but turn northeasterly in Jacksonville airspace. If aircraft were coming from the ocean area bound for more westerly destinations, they would be headed to airways west of the Florida centerline. So east of the centerline, feeding Jacksonville at odd altitudes makes sense. They keep their Ormond Beach corridor and AR traffic at even altitudes, and then in cases like this route, we keep northbound traffic deconflicted from their heavy southbound flow. As discussed earlier, the single deviation from this concept that Jacksonville has requested is for Atlanta arrivals to be delivered at even altitudes from Sector 46. Unlike other Q77 traffic, they turn westbound in Jacksonville airspace. Given that the old Orlando shelf area is exclusively north-flowing with no opposite direction traffic, delivering Atlantas at even altitudes helps them slightly without creating any additional potential for traffic conflicts. Aircraft will enter and exit these sectors at the special altitudes, and the neighboring sectors will do all conversion back to normal altitude rules. For example, we can see the red circled areas where Sector 21 will convert aircraft between the normal altitude for direction of flight rules that Oceanic and Nassau are using, and the special altitude assignment area rules that Sectors 2, 20, 23, and 46 are using. Sector 64 has been removed and replaced with a modified larger version of Sector 2, Hobie. Hobie now overlies sectors 25, 46, 20, and 23 at high altitudes. It also no longer has a flat bottom altitude, a structure necessary to accommodate the new ZJX-ZMA LOA altitude restrictions. Here we see the area Hobie overlies these sectors, and if we look a bit closer, you'll see Hobie owns at or above flight level 320 on the western side of the Florida centerline, and at or above flight level 310 on the eastern side. This way, Jacksonville arrivals can be worked by Hobie down to flight level 310 northbound above the eastern half of Sector 46, while remaining in Hobie's airspace, whereas Fort Myers arrivals via INPIN will be given the charted restriction of INPIN at 31, which is the top of 46 on the western half. This way, as much airspace as possible is given to Hobie so they can alleviate the busy low sectors of most overflight traffic, enabling them to focus purely on working their busy arrival and departure flows. Hobie will be treated differently than other sectors, however. When we split the center between controllers, we always provide a list of which sectors each controller will own. However, with Hobie, think of it more as a sector that is either active or inactive. If Hobie isn't needed, it won't be activated, and the low sectors will each just steal their respective portions of Hobie's altitudes. And if Hobie is active, the entirety of Hobie's airspace will be worked by one specific controller, and none of the low sectors will own the higher altitudes. Looking at a quick example, here we see Hobie's lateral boundary outlined in yellow. When it's active, each sector will own the altitudes shown in the SOP. But when Hobie is inactive, we'll see that each of the low sectors can reach up and steal Hobie's altitudes. For example, in this area, Fort Myers would own 31 and below with Hobie active, or all altitudes with Hobie inactive. Position assignments for events will clearly indicate whether or not Hobie is active or inactive for a given event. And whenever Hobie is active, it is built into the SOP altitude restrictions and the ZJX-ZMA letter of agreement that all aircraft landing within ZMA will be descended to duck under Hobie and enter the low sectors directly. Here you'll see various arrival flows which would be forced down into the side of the low sectors, avoiding Hobie entirely. This concludes the CPC version of the Special Altitude Assignment Area Controller Briefing. Remember, only apply these changes starting on January 1st, 2021. If anything from this video briefing or the provided briefing sheet does not make sense, please reach out on TeamSpeak, via email, or through the ZMA Discord to any trainer who should be able to clear things up for you. Thank you.